Well, the last question that you're raising is how did the Baha'i faith begin? I'll tell you briefly, you know, the first principle of Baha'i faith is independent search for truth, so you need really to go and look for yourself. But to say very briefly, the beginning of 19th century was an amazing period. All over the world, particularly the Islamic world and the Christian world, were looking for return of the Messiah. And so we see this in US, in Europe, and particularly in Iran and some parts of Arabia. So there were, in Europe, there were a group that eventually, gradually, from Germany, they came and settled in Haifa, and their homes are still there. They call them German settlers. And then in US, there were a group, I believe in South Carolina, with a preacher whose name was Miller, and that was also in 1830s, in that time frame, 1830s, 1840s. And then in that time frame, we also had two Muslim scholars, Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazem. So all of these, from Christian world and from Muslim world, they were teaching and preaching that the coming or return of the Messiah is near. Now, they from their Islamic tradition and the others from their Christian tradition. The coming is near, and so maybe we're giving up their lifestyle, their jobs, whatever, and they were looking. And of course, the extreme was the German settlers who actually went to Haifa, that area, and they settled there. That was Mount Carmel, the Mount of God. Actually, this is a photo of the Mount of God. And they went and settled and went to the mountain, looking at this in the sky with their binoculars, saying that Jesus will come in the glory of the Father, riding on a horse. So those people became known as Millerites from US, and I believe part of this group became eventually what's called Seventh-day Adventists. And the group from the east, who were in Iraq at the time, they became known as Sheikhis. So here in this situation, there was a young man from the city of Shiraz in the south of Iran who claimed to be that Messiah, who claimed to be, in effect, the Messiah, who says that the advent, the great advent of the great return is very near. So he was both a Messiah and someone who was preaching or teaching of the coming of the great Messiah. He was a young man of only 25. So as soon as he claimed who he was persecuted, and people who believed in him faced the same kind of persecutions. And actually 18 people, that we call them letters of the living, like disciples of Christ, they were the ones who were really searching themselves, and they found him. And they became his devoted, dedicated followers. And they went to different towns. They were commissioned by the Baha to go to different towns and teach, give this message. And so they went to different provinces of Iran and started teaching. So what I like to do is just to share with you just a couple of prayers from the Baha, from beloved Baha, this young man who was finally very brutally executed. It was the time of one of the brutal Qajar kings of Iran, Nasir-ad-Din Shah. He gave his message in 1844, and he was executed by a firing squad of 750 soldiers in the city of Tabriz, in the north of Iran, where he was executed. These are some of his prayers. Is there any remover of difficulties save God? Say, praise be God. He is God. All are his servants, and all abide by his bidding. Say, God suffices all things above all things, and nothing in the heavens or in the earth but God sufficeth. Verily he is in himself the knower, the sustainer, the omnipotent. And another of his prayers, he says, O Lord, thou the remover of every anguish and the dispeller of every affliction. Thou art he who banisheth every sorrow and setteth free every slave. The Redeemer of every soul, O Lord, grant deliverance through thy mercy, and reckon me among such servants of thine as have gained salvation. In any case, after he was shot to death, they threw his remains together with another Baha'i, they called him Baha'i at the time, who was shot with him, in the deserts. And then some of his followers, in the middle of the night, they went and collected his remains, put it in the casket, and for years and years, for almost half a century, for over half a century, they were hiding it in different parts of Iran until they could get it out of Iran and send it to Palestine, today's Israel, where Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, and Abdul-Baha, his eldest son, were prisoners of the Persian and Ottoman empires at the time. So they finally took it there, I believe it was the year 1899, and the remains remained there until they were buried in a lot that was purchased by Abdul-Baha, the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, on Mount Carmel. And this is the shrine of the Bab in the heart of Mount Carmel, that Mount of God, that Baha'is go as pilgrimage, and thousands of people, of course, go every month to visit and pay tribute to this herald and forerunner and co-founder of the Baha'i faith. You asked me to tell you a little about Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. Baha'is consider him as the fulfillment of all the prophecies of all the previous manifestations of the world. I'll tell you a little about his life, as well as some of his works, and I hope that you'll continue on your own in studying the thousands of tablets that he has written, which, if collected, will come to approximately 100 volumes of books. Baha'u'llah was a young man of 27 years old when, in the year 1844, he heard of the mission of the Bab, who is the forerunner of the Baha'i faith, and he became what we call Babi. He was born in Tehran, the capital city of Iran, and from that point on, he began teaching the Baha'i faith, the Babi faith, and promoting the Babi idea, which would culminate in the new manifestation that is to come. In any case, after the Bab, the forerunner, was executed in the city of Tabriz in northern Iran in 1850, shortly then after, he, together with a number of other Babis, were put in jail, one of the worst, probably the worst jail that was existing at the time in Iran, which was called Siyah Chal, or the Black Pit. And for 4 months they tortured him, together with others. Many of his companions were Babis, were executed. And after 4 months, he was let go under the condition that he would leave Iran, but then still under the custody of both Iran, which was called the Persian Empire, and Ottoman Empire, who were the neighbors. Joint custody, in effect, and in fact, basically under house arrest. And he was sent with his family and a number of companions to Iraq, Baghdad, the capital city of Iraq. I'm going to share with you at the beginning a couple passages of what he says with regard to who he is and his mission. He says, I was but a man like others, when lo, the breezes of the all-glorious were wafted over me, and taught me the knowledge of all that hath been. This thing is not from me, but from one who is almighty and all-knowing. And then in another passage that he recalls his imprisonment in the Siachol, in that black pit, he says, during the days I lay in the prison of Tehran, though the galling weight of the chains and the stench-filled air allowed me but little sleep, still in those infrequent moments of slumber, I felt as if something flowed from the crown of my head over my breast, even as a mighty torrent that precipitateth itself upon the earth from the summit of lofty mountain. Every limb of my body would, as a result, be set afire. At such moments my tongue recited what no man could bear to hear. So after this period, he was sent to Iraq, and under very difficult conditions. It was wintertime, so it was early 1853 when he arrived in the city of Baghdad. With regard to his mission, his eventual mission, I should have mentioned that when he was in Siachol, he got the first intimation that he was the messenger of God for this age. And eventually, with regard to his mission, he says, my object is none other than the betterment of the world and the tranquility of its people. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So that was the beginning of his life, and for a little over 10 years he was in Baghdad, and he kept writing prayers and meditations and some of his mystical writings and some of his moral teachings, and also an important book on what we call regarding progressive revelations. This was all revealed together with a number of other books in that 10-11 time period. Among those, a lot of prayers that he continued to write until the end of his life. I'll share with you one prayer. Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearest to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. And thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise. Just one of thousands of prayers of Baha'u'llah. A book that he composed in Baghdad is as a response to some Sufi masters. It's called The Seven Valleys and the Four Valleys. It's actually two books and two long letters. So in the Seven Valley, he begins with what he called the Valley of Search. I'll just share with you a passage from the beginning of this book and a passage from the end of this book. He says, with regard to the Valley of Search, the very beginning of how we can start exploring. The steed of this valley is patience. Without patience, the wayfarer on this journey will reach nowhere and attain no goal. Nor should he ever be downhearted. If you strive for 100,000 years and yet fail to behold the beauty of the friend, he should not falter. For those who seek the Kaaba for us, rejoice in the tidings. In our ways will we guide them. In their search, they have stoutly girded up the loins of service and seek in every moment to journey from the plane of heedlessness into the realm of being. No bond shall hold them back, and no counsel shall deter them. He basically is telling us that this search should be really sincere, and the sincere searcher would not be impeded by anything at all. Then he goes to the value of love and knowledge and certitude, and until the very last valley. Then he calls this last valley, he calls it the valley of true poverty and absolute nothingness. And he says this station is the dying from self and the living in God, the being poor in self and rich in the desired one. Poverty, as here referred to, signifieth being poor in the things of the created world, rich in the things of God's world. For when the true lover and devoted friend reaches to the presence of the beloved, the sparkling beauty of the loved one and the fire of the lover's heart will kindle a blaze and burn away all veils and wrappings. All he hath from heart to skin will be set aflame, so that nothing would remain save the friend. So this is ultimately when we truly free ourselves and become detached and pure, we become nothing. And when we become nothing, less than a speck of dust, then that's the time to meet the beloved. The more attachment we have, and attachment of self, of ego, of greed, of materialism, of division, of hatred, we are not worthy to meet God. We need to get rid of all these things and free of it all. We are ready, we are detached, we have become nothing, and then we are worthy to meet the beloved. His other work is this beautiful small book called The Hidden Words. In it, there are 150 passages of counsel to mankind as to how we should live our lives, how we should better ourselves, how we should become true human being. He calls it the essence, the summary of all religions. The essence of all religions. So I'll share with you one passage. He says, O friend, in the garden of thy heart, plant not but the rose of love. And from the nightingale of affection and desire, loosen not thy hold. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. So we need to be pure. A human being should be in a state of prayer all the time until we leave this earthly frame and we meet the beloved. So that was composed, I believe, in 1858 in the city of Baghdad. Another important work of Baha'u'llah, which was composed in Baghdad, 1861, 1862, that time frame, is in response to the uncle of the Bab who came to visit him and inquire about the truth of religions and revelations. And this important work, called the Book of Certitude, is Baha'u'llah's response to this person that he composed it in a span of 48 hours, in 200 plus pages, in which he explains how religions are all related. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and up to the faith of the Bab, the forerunner of him, Baha'u'llah. And he explained it in the most exquisite, beautiful way. I'll just share with you a couple passages. He says, for example, that when manifestations of God talk about return, and the followers take it literally, that, for example, Jesus comes back through the clouds on the riding on a horse and all that. This is metaphor. That's not so in reality. So in that regard, he says, thus it is that Jesus himself declared, I go away and come again unto you. Consider the sun. Were it to say now, I'm the son of yesterday, it will speak the truth. And should it, bearing the sequence of time in mind, claim to be other than that sun, it would speak the truth as well. In like manner, this be said that all the days are but one and the same. It is correct and true. And if it is said with respect to their particular names and designations that they differ, that again is true. So he goes on explaining that human beings should not take these passages literally. They have inner meaning, and he explains the question of sun and moon and stars, that in many ways when it is mentioned in previous scriptures that the sun cannot be seen or is under clouds, it means that the influence of that manifestation has gone a little bit away. People are not as sincere as they were at the beginning of that faith, and therefore renewal of religion is necessary. So when he talks about the moon and the stars in different ways, he explains them as perhaps the luminaries or the preachers who were so sincere at the beginning, maybe they're not as sincere as they were before. Or their sincerity is divided into different churches, different groups, different interpretations, and therefore that is not the true, pure message of Jesus Christ, or Muhammad for that matter, or other manifestations of God. So therefore the need for renewal. So in this book then, he explains the idea of progressive revelations, how all religions are connected. Anyway, it was 1863 when on April 21st, April 63, Baha'u'llah thought that it is time for him to explain his mission to a larger audience. So he gathered all his family and friends, and people were there, and invited them to a garden in Baghdad. He was allowed for an area that he could move, and he told them that he's the Messiah that humanity has been waiting for. And we call this the Baha'u'llah's open declaration to mankind. And this was the season of flowers, the springtime. Flowers and roses were blooming, and this is the most holy celebration for Baha'is. We call it the celebration of Rizwan. It was at that time that the Ottoman Empire, through the instigation of Persian Empire, wanted Baha'u'llah to go further away from Iran, where it was the major source of his influence, where a lot of people were becoming Babis. They were called Babis at the time. So they sent him away to Istanbul, which I don't know, maybe 700-800 miles away from that region. But then he was there for 3-4 months, and then they wanted him to send him further away. So they sent him further away to a city in the farthest most of Ottoman Empire, which is actually in Europe, near Greece, called Adrianople. And Baha'u'llah, together with all these companions, some of them were left behind in Baghdad, many of them wanted to come with him, and so they were there. And toward the end of this day, in addition to prayers and other things that he produced, he also wrote a series of tablets that we call them Proclamation of Baha'u'llah to kings and rulers of the world. And he wrote to all the kings and leaders, religious leaders of the world, admonishing them with regard to this hoarding of ammunitions, of becoming selfish, everything for themselves, not taking care of the population. He was more gentle towards some of them, like the Queen of England, who had taken the lead in abolishing slavery, in taking the lead in providing some rights for women, and so on. And he was a lot harsher to a number of more militant and greedy monarchs, such as Napoleon III of France, and Nicholas of Russia, and I believe it was Wilhelm of Prussia, the Germany and Austria, that region, and Sultan Abdul-Aziz of of Ottoman Empire, today's Turkey and beyond, and Nasser Shah, the king of Iran. So it is quite a weighty message, so many different tablets. I'll share with you just one passage from what he wrote to the king of Iran. And many know the story that when the messenger was a 16, 17-year-old young boy titled Badi that wanted to take the message of Baha'u'llah to the king. And when the king found out who he is and what it is, they tortured him to death. And the young boy died. But this is part of that message that he sent to Nasser Shah. O king, I was but a man like others, asleep upon my couch, when lo, the breezes of the All-Glorious were wafted over me, and taught me the knowledge of all that hath been. This thing is not from me, but from one who is almighty and all-knowing. And he bade me lift up my voice between earth and heaven. And for this there befell me what hath caused the tears of every man of understanding to flow. The learning current amongst men I studied not. Their schools I entered not. Ask of the city wherein I dwelt, that thou mayest be well assured that I am not of them who speak falsely. This is but the leaf which the winds of the will of thy Lord, the Almighty, the All-Praised, have stirred. Can it be still when the tempestuous winds are blowing? Nay, by him who is the Lord of all names and attributes, they move it as they list. And so on. So anyway, this is the tablet to him. And to all of them, he gave them warning that they should change their ways and start working for the good of mankind. And that's called the tablet Proclamation of Baha'u'llah to kings and rulers of the world. So from there, they sent Baha'u'llah and his entourage from Akka, from Adrianople after 5 years, it was now 1868, through the sea in the hot summer month of August. He reached the shores of Palestine near the city of Akka, which at the time was the main jail for criminals was there. And for 2 years they kept him in this prison that's still there. When I went to Israel, I went and visited this jail. A horrific place where they kept him without adequate food and water and shelter for 2 years in a hole with women and children. So it's a lot of brutality that happened. So after 2 years, they allowed him to move out of there and live in a house. And gradually, the governor of Akka and Haifa, that region, noticed how gentle this group is and allowed them to move in that region, but they were not allowed to leave that short distance of a few miles. So anyway, while he was there, he wrote many books and tablets. He wrote a number of tablets, many of them responses to Baha'is or others, with regard to his message and what he has to offer to mankind. So I'll just read a couple passages from this book, which is called Tablets of Baha'u'llah, revealed in Akka. Some of them are from different time periods, perhaps between 1870 to 1875 or so, that time frame. So for example, he says in a passage, in a tablet which is called Tarazat, this is what he tells humanity. He says, he goes through first and second, so the second Taraz is to consort with followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship, to proclaim that which the speaker on Sinai has set forth, and to observe fairness in all matters. They that are endued with sincerity and faithfulness, should associate with all the people and kindreds of the earth with joy and radiance. So anyway, this is counsel after counsel as to how we should live our lives, how we should see mankind as members of the same family, and how we can change the world by changing ourselves. In another passage, in another tablet called the Tablet of the Dunya, the Tablet of the World, he says, "Arise, O people, and by the power of God's might, resolve to gain the victory over your own selves, that haply the whole earth may be freed and sanctified from its servitude to the gods of the idle fancies." So he's not telling us that the main way that we can change the world is changing ourselves. You know, a lot of bad things happen because of human arrogance. A lot of war happens because of human arrogance. A lot of fighting happens because one person says, "I have the truth," the other person says, "I have the truth," and then fighting, either duking it out by fist or going to a court. You know, it may be a little better, but not that much better. You know, if we become selfless and loving, and there shouldn't be any reason for that kind of fight, because all of us will become honest and just in our dealings with others. So there are so many admonitions and so many counsels and so many letters, tablets, that he wrote in that time period. Then it was 1873, I believe, that he composed this book called the Kitab al-Aqdas, or the Most Holy Book. This is Baha'u'llah's book of laws. Laws with regard to prayers, fasting, paying to charity, the division of your inheritance, and so many other laws. And so I'll just read for you a couple passages from this book. He says, toward the beginning of the book, "O ye people of the world, know assuredly that my commandments are the lamps of my loving providence among my servants, and the keys of my mercy for my creatures. Thus hath it been sent down from the heaven of the will of your Lord, the Lord of revelation. But any man to taste the sweetness of the words which the lips of the All-Merciful have willed to utter, he would, though the treasures of the earth be in his possession, renounce them all, and he might vindicate the truth of even one of his commandments, shining above the dayspring of his bountiful care and loving kindness." So after you begin believing in manifestations of God and Baha'u'llah, then he obviously has a set of commandments as to how to live our lives, and we would abide by it. As to how we should live a life which is a holy life. So that was that one. Baha'u'llah also responded to letters or questions that people had, either Baha'i or non-Baha'i. This one, for example, revealed, I believe, in early 80s, is called Tabernacle of Unity, which is a response to a Zoroastrian leader. You know, the religion of Iran before Islam was Zoroastrian, and there were still a number of Zoroastrians, and so he was a Zoroastrian leader that he responded to. So, for example, in this book, somewhere, page 5, he says, "As to the question concerning the heavenly scriptures, the all-knowing physician hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Every age hath its own problem, and every soul its particular aspiration. The remedy the world needeth in its present day can never be the same as that which a subsequent age may require. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements." It goes on. So in fact, he says that, you know, as long as there's man, humankind, we need the guidance of prophets, manifestation of God. But this, because man forgets, and because man also advances, the same teachings, the same social teachings, cannot endure forever. a lot of problems we see in the world 5 centuries ago in the Christian world and the last 2-3 centuries in the Muslim world is because particularly of those who think of the social teaching of the religion stagnant. So they stick to it, and that causes a lot of problems. So we don't have time right now to go through that list that Baha'u'llah explains. Baha'u'llah, there's so much, so I'm just giving you a very brief summary of all these things. So as you see, I'm just giving you one passage from each one of these lofty works, and you need to study of them on your own. Another series of writings that he composed in the course of perhaps 15-20 years is this work that is composed and summarized in this book, which is called Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah. Let me share with you a couple passages from this book. He says in a passage, the measure of the revelation of the prophets of God in this world must differ. Each and every one of them hath been the bearer of a distinct message and hath been commissioned to reveal himself through specific acts. It is for this reason that they appear to vary in their greatness. The revelation may be likened unto the light of the moon that sheddeth its radiance upon the earth. Though every time it appeareth, it revealeth a fresh measure of its brightness. Yet its inherent splendor can never diminish, nor can its light suffer extinction. So he's telling us that religion needs to be renewed. There's no difference between the son of yesterday and son of today, but the teachings are updated based on need of the time. Now, because there has been so much misunderstanding in this regard, in this compilation, actually that's the last passage, Baha'u'llah also explains that his own mission is for a period of 1,000 years. And after that there has to be a new manifestation coming from God to teach us new teachings suitable for 800 years from now that we can't even imagine how it will be like. So in that regard he says, whoso layeth claim to a revelation direct from God ere the expiration of a full 1,000 years, such a man is assuredly a lying impostor. He pray God that he may graciously assist him to retract and repudiate such claim. Should he repent, God will no doubt forgive him. If, however, he persisteth in his error, God will assuredly send down one who will deal mercilessly with him. And so on. So he is telling us that definitely after 1,000 years there has to be a new revelation. Let me conclude. This is just a gist of Baha'u'llah's writings. That toward the end of his life, he passed away in 1892 in Accra. While he was in that house, after he was released from the jail, he revealed this book, which is called Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. This is titled this because of one of the so many brutal Muslim Ayatollahs, preachers, who, because of greed mainly, and hatred toward Baha'is, he killed 2 innocent, wonderful Baha'is named Hassan and Hussein in the city of Isfahan. And so Baha'u'llah wrote this tablet, this book, this weighty book of about 200 pages or so, explaining his mission as to why is it that you people become so fanatic and don't listen, don't understand what the message of God is. So he says that the diverse communions of the earth and the manifold system of religious belief should never be allowed to foster the feelings of animosity among men. These principles and laws, these firmly established and mighty systems, have proceeded from one source and are rays of one light. That they differ one from another is to be attributed to the varying requirements of the age in which they were promulgated. And so he explains all of these things, and he explains a lot of his teachings as to what they are. So in any case, Baha'u'llah then passed away while he was in this city of Akka, and his shrine is also in Akka, Israel. And that is a photo of that shrine. Thank you. You asked me to tell you more about Abdul-Baha, whom we call the center of the covenant. You know, one thing that is very crucial and important in Baha'i faith is the covenant. Baha'u'llah experiences that the greater covenant and the lesser covenant, which means that God never leaves us alone. Once every 1,000 years, approximately, a new manifestation comes to guide humanity, and then within the religion, the manifestation appoints somebody to follow him, and he would in turn appoint someone to follow him. So that would be called the lesser covenant. So before Baha'u'llah passed away, he appointed Abdul-Baha in his will and testament, his eldest son, as what we call the center of the covenant. And what that means is that in order not to cause division that happened in all past religions, he mandated that this is my will, that after I pass away, if you have any questions, anything that you do not understand, go to Abdul-Baha and he would explain it for you. And so it was. The year was 1892. Baha'u'llah passed away in Akka, and Abdul-Baha, who officially was still a prisoner, basically under house arrest, and at that time they could move within a certain area, maybe a few miles, became what we call the center of the covenant. Now, before Baha'u'llah passed away, actually a number of years before he passed away, in 1875, Baha'u'llah commissioned Abdul-Baha to write something, and that is what he wrote. It was called The Secret of Divine Civilization, which was sent to Iran and Iranians, basically telling them, showing them how they can live a better life, a more humane life, a more just life, a more enlightened life. Which is really a repository for humankind, but at that time it was sent particularly to Iran. So he concludes this book, which is 116 pages, with this passage. Happy the soul that shall forget his own good, and like the chosen ones of God, vie with his fellows in service to the good of all, until, strengthened by the blessings and perpetual confirmation of God, he shall be empowered to raise this mighty nation up to its ancient pinnacles of glory, and restore this withered land to sweet new life, and as the spiritual springtime, array those trees which are the lives of men with the fresh leaves, the blossoms and fruits of consecrated joy. So, anyway, Abdul-Baha then remained under confinement until around 1908, 1909. And at that time, it was the beginning of disintegration of Ottoman Empire, and all the political prisoners were set free, including Abdul-Baha. Now, during that time, pilgrims came and visited Abdul-Baha, those who were Baha'is from Europe, from US, from Iran, India, and elsewhere. And among those who came and visited him was an American lady who had become Baha'i, but she had a lot of questions. Her name was Clifford Barney, and she came to the Holy Land, to Israel, Haifa, Akka area, to visit Abdul-Baha and ask him a number of questions. And so Abdul-Baha noticed that she has a lot of questions, asked her that she can stay for a while, and then every noon at lunch hour, we all sit at the table, you ask the question, I'll try to respond to you. So, and this took a period of 2 years, For 2 years, he was asking Abdul-Baha questions. At lunchtime, Abdul-Baha was responding. And that became this book of 300 pages called Some Answered Questions. A very important book, and a lot of questions that Christians had with regard to the mission of Baha'u'llah and how the proofs with regard to the mission of Baha'u'llah. And then a number of questions on economic issues, on variety of other issues. The question of free will and what that means. The question of reincarnation and Abdul-Baha's perspective and so on. So let me just look at one passage. For example, one day she asked Abdul-Baha, what is the meaning of Christ's resurrection after 3 days? That most Christians believe that Jesus was crucified, then he went to heaven, and after 3 days he came back. So this is Abdul-Baha's response. The resurrections of the divine manifestations are not of the body. All their states, their conditions, their acts, the things they have established, their teachings, their expressions, their parables, and their instructions have a spiritual and divine significance and have no connection with material things. For example, there is the subject of Christ coming from heaven. It is clearly stated in many places in the Gospel that the Son of Man came from heaven. He is in heaven, and he will go to heaven. So in chapter 6, verse 38 of the Gospel of John, it is written, "For I came down from heaven," and also in verse 2 we find, "And they said, Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he saith, I came down from heaven?" Also in John chapter 3, verse 13, "And no man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven." So he explains all of these things, that they are allusions, and they have deeper meaning, and that does not mean physical ascending to heaven. Jesus came from heaven, he went back to heaven. And if we say that he came back to earth, spiritually he came back to earth, not in physical body. So beautiful explanation of all of these things. I hope you can read it on your own. Now, after Abdul-Baha was freed from prison, 1908, 1909, then a number of believers from the East, and particularly from the West, wanted to convince him to please come to Europe, particularly France and England and Canada and US, where there were some Baha'is, to go and visit with them and try to go to places to help us teach the Baha'i faith. So finally, in 1911, Abdul-Baha agreed and went to Europe. And then from Europe, he, by ship, he traveled to the US. And within the course of 9 months, I believe, from April to December of 1912, he gave talks in synagogues, in churches, in philanthropic organizations, in so many different places, in universities, so many different talks on different subjects. Let me just share with you a passage or two from his talks when he was here. So, for example, this one, he gives this talk in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on May 7th, 1912. I'll just share with you a few passages. "Each one of the divine religions embodies two kinds of ordinances. The first is those which concern spiritual susceptibilities, the development of moral principles, and the quickening of the conscience of man. These are essential or fundamental, one and the same in all religions, changeless and eternal, a reality not subject to transformation. Abraham heralded this reality, Moses promulgated it, and Jesus Christ established it in the world of mankind. All the divine prophets and messengers were the instruments and channels of this same eternal essential truth. The second kind of ordinances in the divine religions is those which relate to the material affairs of mankind. These are the material or accidental laws which are subject to change in each day of manifestation, according to exigencies of the time, conditions, and differing capacities of humanity. For instance, in the days of Moses, 10 commandments in regard to murder were revealed by him. These commandments were in accordance with the requirements of the day and time. Other laws embodying drastic punishments were enacted by Moses: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The penalty for theft was amputation of the hand. These laws and penalties were applicable to the degree of the Israelis, people of that period, who dwelt in the wilderness and desert under conditions where severity was necessary and justifiable. But in the time of Jesus, this kind of law was not expedient. Therefore, Christ abrogated and suspended the commandments of Moses. And so he goes on and saying that, some laws, the next manifestation repeals them. And some laws, particularly the moral laws, stay basically the same. So he gave so many different talks in that regard. And then another works of his was, of course, so many different Baha'is and some non-Baha'is who wrote him letters or came and asked questions, and Abdu'l-Baha tried to respond. And this is just some of thousands upon thousands of letters that he responded to in like 350 pages, called Selection from the Writings of Abdul-Baha. Let me try to find a passage or two and share with you some of these passages. For example, in this passage it says, Christ, Jesus, summoned all mankind to amity and peace. Unto Peter he said, put up thy sword into the sheath. Such was the bidding and counsel of the Lord Christ. And yet today the Christians, one and all, have drawn their swords from out of the scabbard. How wide is the discrepancy between such acts and the clear gospel text? This was right before World War I, when a Christian nation rose around against another Christian nation, and there was so much atrocity, 1 million people were slaughtered. And so Abba raises this question, how can it be? If you're all children of the same God, followers of the same religion, how can you fight so violently against one another? And so it is that Abdul-Baha wrote so many books and gave so many talks, and he passed away in 1921. And after him, he had a will and testament. Do I have the will and testament? Yeah, this is the will and testament of Abdul-Baha. And he appointed his grandson, whose name was Shoghi Effendi, as the guardian and protector of the faith. Let me share with you a passage from his will and testament. It is incumbent upon these members, let's talk about universal house of justice and the local house of justice, to gather in a certain place and deliberate upon all problems which have caused difference, questions that are obscure, and matters that are not expressly recorded in the book. Whatsoever they decide has the same effect as the text itself, and as much as this house of justice has power to enact laws that are not expressly recorded in the book and bear upon daily transactions, so also it has power to repeal the same. And he goes on, so this is his will, that God for this age has established laws and procedures and methods so that we will not be divided again. Thank you for your attention. Ask me about the continuation of the covenant, and after the passing of Abdul-Baha, the center of the covenant. I had indicated to you that after Abdul-Baha passed away, in his will and testament, he appointed his eldest grandson, Shoghi Effendi, as the guardian of the faith. And so this was 1921. And at that point, then Shoghi Effendi, a young man, He was 24 years old and became the guardian of the Baha'i faith. Now, he did so many different things. But in addition to beautifying the holy shrines of the Bab in Haifa and Baha'u'llah shrine in Akka, and all the gardens in that region, he also spent a lot of time meticulously writing or translating some of the works of Baha'u'llah. You know, the Book of Certitude, the Epistle tablets to the kings, and other tablets of Baha'u'llah, and so on. And he was instrumental in consolidating the administrative order of the Baha'i faith, so that the Baha'i faith would not become divided like other religions. In showing humankind in general, and Baha'is in particular, the way to consult, the way to deal with issues, the way to stay harmonized and united together. So I'll just share with you some of his writings. One such writing, a lot of them were composed during 1930s. This one's called The Advent of Divine Justice. And he basically explains the period between World War I and World War II, the mess that we're in, and that what a torturous period humankind need to go through until we reach that level of peace and tranquility, which is so badly needed in the world. I'll read for you a passage or two from The Advent of Divine Justice. A world dimmed by the steadily dying out light of religion, heaving with the explosive forces of a blind and triumphant nationalism, scorched with the fires of pitiless persecution, whether racial or religious, deluded by the false theories and doctrines that threaten to supplant the worship of God and the sanctification of His laws, enervated by rampant and brutal materialism, disintegrating through the corrosive influence of moral and spiritual decadence, and enmeshed in the coils of economic anarchy and strife. Such is the spectacle presented to men's eyes as a result of the sweeping changes which this revolutionary force, as yet in the initial stage of its operation, is now producing in the life of the entire planet. Basically, it's telling us the world is a mess. Religious, nationalistic, racial, gender, materialism, and so on, and that the solutions are provided by Baha'u'llah in his writings, if humankind listens. In his writings, he also alludes to the fact of the important role of America. There's a lot of respect for the future of this continent and this nation and the role that it will play. This is a passage that he quotes from Abdul-Baha with regard to America. May this American democracy be the first nation to establish the foundation of international agreement. May it be the first nation to proclaim the unity of mankind. May it be the first to unfurl the standards of the most great peace. The American people are indeed worthy of being the first to build the tabernacle of the great peace and proclaim the oneness of mankind. For America hath developed powers and capacities greater and more wonderful than other nations. The American nation is equipped and empowered to accomplish that which will adorn the pages of history, to become the envy of the world, and be blessed in both the East and the West for the triumph of its people. The American continent gives signs and evidences of very great advancement. Its future is even more promising, for its influence and illumination are far-reaching. It will lead all the nation spiritually. So this is quite a read, The Advent of Divine Justice. Another book he wrote in that time period is called The Promised Day is Come. The travail that mankind needs to go through until we call this period the formative age of the Baha'i era, or the formative age of the human era, really, from 1921 until whenever this phase finishes. And after this phase is complete, we believe that we reach what Jesus called peace on earth as is in heaven, and Baha'u'llah calls the golden age of human era. And this book, on page 176, explains the continuity of revelation. The faith standing identified with the name of Baha'u'llah disclaims any intention to belittle any of the prophets gone before him, or to whittle down any of their teachings, to obscure, however slightly, the radiance of the revelations, to oust them from the hearts of their followers, to abrogate the fundamentals of the doctrines, to discard any of the revealed books, or to suppress the legitimate aspirations of their adherents. And he goes on explaining that basically the Baha'i faith has not come to replace past religions, but to complement it, to bring it up to date, because this is the same basic truth that God has revealed to man through ages. Another beautiful word, the promised day is come. Then this is a collection of Shoghi Effendi's letters dealing with the problems of the world, and then the promise that Baha'u'llah gives to humanity and his elaboration and interpretation and explanation. Let me read a couple of passages from this book. He again mentions that world unity is the goal of the Baha'i faith, and says that unification of the whole mankind is the hallmark of the stage which human society is now approaching. Unity of family, of tribe, of city-state, and nations have been successfully attempted and fully established. World unity is the goal towards which a harassed humanity is striving. Nation building has come to an end. The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving towards a climax. A world growing to maturity must abandon this fetish, recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relationships, and establish once and for all the machinery that can best incarnate this fundamental principle of its life. Baha'u'llah proclaims a new life is in this stage, in this age, stirring within all the peoples of the earth, and yet none hath discovered its cause or perceived its motive. O ye children of men, the fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race. This is the straight path, the fixed and immovable foundation. Whatsoever is raised on this foundation, the changes and chances of the world can never impair its strength, nor will the revolution of countless centuries undermine its structure. So he goes on explaining the future vision of this, of when humankind comes together as one human race. The World Order Baha'u'llah, selected letters of Shoghi Effendi. Another one of his writings, titled The Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, is a summary of some of those letters, really. He explains, for example, what the vision of this commonwealth, the commonwealth of the future is. He says the Baha'i commonwealth of the future, of which this vast administrative order is the sole framework, is both in theory and practice not only unique in the entire history of political institutions, but can find no parallel in the annals of any of the world's recognized religious systems. No form of democratic government, no system of autocracy or of dictatorship, whether monarchical or republican. No intermediary scheme of a purely aristocratic order, nor even any of the recognized types of theocracy, whether in the Hebrew Commonwealth or the various Christian ecclesiastical organizations or the imamate or the caliphate in Islam. None of these can be identified or be said to conform with the administrative order which the master hand of its perfect architect has fashioned. So he explains that the Baha'i Commonwealth, the vision of unity, goes far beyond any system, whereas different elements of it may be seen in the Baha'i vision of this order, but it has so many unique features. So he explains all of those. Let me share with you one more of his works called God Passes By, which is really an analysis of the history of the Baha'i faith. Some of the things I mentioned from the Bab and Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, and the vision of the administrative order of the Baha'i faith. He explains it all. And let me try to find a passage and share one passage with regard to how he explains, for example, who Baha'u'llah is. He says, to him, Isaiah, the greatest of the Jewish prophets, had alluded as the glory of the Lord, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, the Wonderful, the Counselor, the rod come forth out of the stem of Jesse, and the branch grown out of his roots, who shall be established upon the throne of David, who will come with strong hand, who shall judge among the nations, who shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips slay the wicked, and who shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judea from the four corners of the earth. Of him David had sung in his psalms, acclaiming him as the Lord of hosts and the King of glory. To him Haggai had referred as the desire of all nations, and Zechariah as the branch who shall grow up out of his place, and shall build the temple of the Lord. Ezekiel had extolled him as the Lord who shall be king over all the earth, while on his day Joel and Zephaniah had both referred as the day of Jehovah, the latter describing it as the day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of the trumpet and alarm against the fenced cities and against the high towers. His day Ezekiel had and Daniel had moreover both acclaimed as the day of the Lord, and Malachi described as the great and dreadful day of the Lord, when the Son of Righteousness will arise with healing in his wings, whilst Daniel had pronounced his advent as signalizing the end of the abomination that maketh desolate. To his dispensation, the sacred books of the followers of Zoroaster had referred as that in which the sun must needs be brought to a standstill for no less than one whole month. To him Zoroaster must have alluded when, according to tradition, he foretold that the period of 3,000 years of conflict and contention must needs precede the advent of the world Savior, Shah Bahram, who would triumph over Ahriman and usher in an era of blessedness and peace. He alone is meant by the prophecy attributed to Gautama Buddha himself, that the Buddha named Maitreya, the Buddha of universal fellowship, should in the fullness of time arise and reveal his boundless glory. To him the Bhagavad Gita of the Hindus had referred as the most great spirit, the 10th avatar, the immaculate manifestation of Krishna. To him Jesus Christ had referred as the Prince of this world, as the Comforter, who would reprove the world of sin and of righteousness and of judgment, as the Spirit of truth, who will guide you into all truth, who shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak, as the Lord of the vineyard, as the Son of Man, who shall come in the glory of his Father, in the clouds of heaven, with power and great glory, with all the holy angels about him, and all nations gathered before his throne. To him the author of the Apocalypse had alluded as the glory of God, as Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last, identifying his revelation with the third woe. He moreover extolled his law as a new heaven and a new earth, as the tabernacle of God, as the holy city, as the new Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven. prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. To his day, Jesus Christ himself had referred as the regeneration when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory. To the hour of his advent, St. Paul had alluded as the hour of the last trump, as the trump of God, while St. Peter had spoken of it as the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. His day he furthermore had described as the times of refreshing, the times of restitution of all things which God had spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets since the world began. To him Muhammad, the apostle of God, had alluded in his book as the great announcement, and declared his day to be the day whereon God will come down, overshadowed with cloud, the day whereon the Lord shall come, and the angels rank on rank, and the Spirit shall arise, and the angels shall be ranged in order. His advent he, in that book, in a surah said to have been termed by him the heart of Quran, had foreshadowed as that of the third messenger sent down to strengthen the two who preceded him. To his day he, in the pages of that same book, had paid a glowing tribute, glorifying it as the great day, the last day, the day of God, the day of judgment, the day of reckoning, the day of mutual deceit, the day of severing, the day of sighing, the day of meeting, the day when the decree shall be accomplished, the day whereon the second trumpet blast will be sounded, the day when mankind shall stand before the Lord of the world, and all shall come to him in humble guise, the day when thou shalt see the mountains which thou thinkest so firm pass away with the passing of a cloud, the day wherein account shall be taken, the approaching day when men's hearts shall rise up, choking them in their throats, the day when all that are in the heavens and all that are in the earth shall be terror-stricken, save him whom God pleaseth to deliver, the day whereon every suckling woman shall forsake her suckling babe, and every woman that hath a burden in her womb shall cast a burden, the day when the earth shall shine with the light of the Lord, and the book shall be set, and the prophets shall be brought up, and the witness, and judgment shall be given between them with equity, and none shall be wronged. So this is just a sampling of what Shoghi Effendi explains as the prophecies of all the past religions with regard to Baha'u'llah, the prophet for this age. For the first time in the history of mankind, all the holy writings and everything revealed by the Bab and Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha and Shoghi Effendi are kept in a building on Mount Carmel next to the shrine of the Bab, which is the repository of all the holy writings of the Baha'i faith, called the Archives Building. If you ever go to Haifa, make sure you go and visit this amazing building on Mount Carmel. You asked me to tell you about a little about the current history and developments in the Baha'i faith after the guardian of the faith, Shoghi Effendi, passed away. He passed away in 1957. There was a period that we call the period of custodians. Between 1957 to 1963, a number of individuals who we call hands of the cause, who assisted Abdul-Baha and then Shoghi Effendi with regard to protection and propagation of the Baha'i faith. They gathered in Haifa and began the process of formation of the universal law of justice. And then in 1963, in a conference in London, the Baha'is gathered and then inaugurated the beginning of this election process of electing 9 people for 5 years to represent Baha'is all across the globe. And according to Baha'u'llah's writings, they are, as a group, they'll be, they can basically write laws and abrogate laws, nothing that has been revealed by Baha'u'llah, but anything else. So they cannot interpret the writings like Abdul-Baha did or Shoghi Effendi did, but they could elucidate on writings if Baha'is have questions. or write laws that they can also repeal themselves based on the situation. So this is an amazing building on Mount Carmel, close to the Shrine of the Baha. There's a building which is called the seat of the Universal House of Justice. So they, in turn, issue pronouncements once every few years with regard to the condition of the world. We're still in what we call the formative age of humanity until we reach the golden age, the steps that we have achieved, the process that this goes through. Also, they have a number of people who assist them. You know, I mentioned that this building right here is the archives building where all the original writings, for the first time in the history of religion, all the original writings with due signature or stamp of Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, are all collected and preserved in this building. Right next to it, there's another building called, this is the building for the study of the text. There are a number of Baha'i scholars who are chosen by the Universal House of Justice who reside in Haifa for a number of years, as long as it is necessary. The House so determines, and their job is to help the House with regard to collecting the tablets, the writings, the translation process, and things of that nature. So this is that building there. Now, I'll share with you just some of the writings of the House of Justice. For example, in 1980s, they came up with this pronouncement, the promise of world peace. And they gave us basically a progress report. Here they say that, you know, for the first time in history, the dream of peace on earth is within the reach of the nations. Indeed, peace is the next stage in the evolution of this planet. Humanity has the choice of reaching peace after unimaginable catastrophes or achieving it by an act of will. So it goes on and explains the problems. Again, it's just reminding us what are the problems and what are the solutions that Baha'u'llah proposes, and where are we with regard to achieving of these. They indicate on page 10 that racism, a baneful evil, is a major barrier to peace. The inordinate disparity between rich and poor keeps the world in a state of instability, virtually on the brink of war. Unbridled nationalism must give way to a wider loyalty to the love of humanity as a whole. Religious strife, the cause of innumerable wars and conflicts, is increasingly abhorrent to people of all faiths and no faith. The achievement of full equality between the sexes is one of the most important prerequisites of peace. Universal education deserves the utmost support that governments can lend it. For ignorance is the principal reason for the decline and fall of people. The fundamental lack of communication between peoples seriously undermines efforts toward world peace. So they go on explaining the problems of the world as they see it, that was the 1980s, and then the achievements with regard to getting close to world peace. In 1990s, they issued another pronouncement, the prosperity of humankind. And they assess again where we are with regard to these challenges. So they talk about unemployment, about the economic challenges, about the race issues, the wars and things of that nature. And then they explain basically where we are again with regard to all these issues that humankind is facing, and then ultimately that if we are all aware of it and working to make it better, it will finally get there. They give a quote from Baha'u'llah: "This is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out upon the men, the day in which His most mighty grace hath been infused into all created things." Another writing close getting close to the year 2000. They're basically giving a summary of the deeds and misdeeds of man, the achievements and the atrocities of man in the 20th century. But overall, they call it the century of light. So many inventions that we have had, so much progress in the human mind, the development of the human mind, the achievements with regard to women's rights, to somewhat of racial equity, to ways of eliminating disease and hunger and water purification. So they assess where we are with regard to all of these issues that humankind is facing and the challenges and the achievements in all of those. Toward the end of this collection of 150 pages, they say, it is not therefore in providing support, nor encouragement, nor even example that the work of the cause chiefly lies. The Baha'i community will go on contributing in every way possible to efforts towards global unification and social betterment. But such contributions are secondary to its purpose. Its purpose is to assist the people of the world to open their minds and hearts to the one power that can fulfill their ultimate longing. There are none except those who have themselves awakened to the revelation of God who can bring this help. We need to be aware this is a new age. It has new challenges. The foundation of all religions are one, but this age has new challenges that we have to face until we reach the golden age. And recently, I guess the year was 2005, Universal Justice came up with another pronouncement. All of these incremental achievements for us to get closer to that world peace. And they call this one common faith. You know, I'm encouraged by these different interfaith groups that I go to and see how much we have progressed. We sit down and talk to each other. Not only that, we sit down and appreciate one another as members of the same family, as people of faith who have so many things in common, and we cherish that, those achievements, and also we try to realize what challenges are. Here, for example, this document, which is not very long, it's about 60 pages, on page 20, they say that to presume to judge among the messages of God, exalting one above the other, would be to give in to the delusion that the eternal and all-embracing is subject to the vagaries of human preference. It is clear and evident to thee, Baha'u'llah, precise words, that all the prophets are the temples of the cause of God, who have appeared clothed in diverse attire. If thou wilt observe with discriminating eyes, thou wilt behold them all abiding in the same tabernacle, soaring in the same heaven, seated upon the same throne, uttering the same speech, and proclaiming the same faith. With that, I should also conclude in saying that throughout this period, from the time of Abdul-Baha, the period of interpretation, then Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the faith, and universal justice up to the present time, and in the future, anytime, any person has any question whatsoever, they can write to universal justice, and if it is a legitimate question and needing clarification with regard to any laws or any teaching in the Baha'i faith, they would respond. And that response becomes a part of this compilation, which will have other compilations in the future, called Lights of Guidance. And so, with regard to any question whatsoever, they keep informing and guiding us on different issues. I'll just give you the heading with regard to some of the issues that Baha'i faith, the Baha'i institutions have been grappling with, and then being provided with response and clarification year after year as necessary. So here there are passages about administrative order, the Baha'i local spiritual assemblies, formation of local spiritual assemblies, annual conventions, So many different topics. Meetings of Baha'i assemblies, attendance, resignations, other regulations, administrative rights and sanctions and appeals and bylaws for these assemblies, issues with regard to new believers, the believer relationship with the assembly, inactive believers, then the different teachings of Baha'u'llah and what constitutes backbiting, criticism, fault-finding, gossip, lies, slander, and how we should deal with it, how the institution should guide people with regard to different issues as necessary. Then discussion with regard to Baha'i authors and Baha'i writers and their responsibility, arts and drama, Baha'i life, the question of ego and sacrifice and self and service, the issue of charity and helping the poor, calamities and crisis, and children, many children issue, and education issues, committees and how committees function, consultation, the importance of consultation, one of the most important topics that we are still being updated on. And so it just goes on and on. The issue of cremation and funeral services and suicide and life after death. So there's so many issues, so just hundreds. And so this compilation, which was compiled maybe about 10 years ago, is about 700 pages of detailed instructions. So with that, I conclude this series and thank you for your attention.